Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're going to discuss the idea of sequencing. Many times I get the question of how women can have it all. Are they supposed to have it all? And this is a really good question and something that we need to take into consideration because it is possible to have many different roles in life, but it is not possible really to have them all at once. And so we want to look at that and why that is and why this makes a difference as women progress through their lifespan. So I want to start with looking at our community, our Muslim community that is, and consider what are some of the basic building blocks of that community, particularly family as a building block. So whether you are actively participating as a family member and in terms of being a wife and mother, or you're someone's sister, or you're a young woman growing into your womanhood, it is important to consider all those roles throughout the lifespan and how you can best maneuver them to create the kind of lifestyle that you're looking to have. And so first we want to consider being mindful of what those different roles are, right? Because it is in fact women that we learn in Quran and in Hadith that have a very large role to play in creating community and creating family. And so it's important that we really think about very mindfully and very consciously how we are going to execute that role. So let's think about when we first start out in our years of education. Of course, we know from history, the history of women in Islam, that we are promoted to have education, that it's an expectation that we will all, men and women, be lifelong learners. And so it's important to examine that role of education in your life. However, education is only part of the role that you play. When you think about whether you're going to get married before or after your education, or if you're going to get married at all. Some women these days are choosing not to get married. You need to consider, that there's not one formula in executing your lifelong plan, right? But at the same time, you also need to make space for everything has a sequence to it. So it is okay if one chooses to get their education, take a break, have a family, and then go back to executing the education that they prepared for. It's also okay to have your education, work for a little while, have your family, and go back to work. If you choose to work while you are having your family, that's a possibility as well. And for some people, it is an absolute necessity because of financial circumstances. However, when you're doing that, you need to take into account what are your support systems, because you can't usually manage that all by oneself. So it's important to consider, does the community have support systems in place to help me? Can my extended family members help me? What are the different types of support that I have at my disposal so that I can be successful in what I'm trying to create? And this is really important, and I want to just delve in a little detour for a minute to talk about family. In our previous episode, when we were talking about positive parenting in the Muslim home, we alluded to the idea of child development in the years of 0 to 5. We will have an episode upcoming that will delve in even deeper to this topic, but I just want to touch on it for a moment because the 0 to 5 years are so crucial in the development of children for the rest of their lives that I can't express enough why it is so important that if you're choosing the role of motherhood, that it is one that is mindful of this fact, and not one that is, as Quran talks about, the people who choose to become parents for their egos, right? The people who choose to have one child, second child, third child, to show the world that they have this many children. as opposed to the person who's mindful and says, okay, if I'm going to have a child, what do I need to do to prepare for having that child? What kind of time and what kind of focus do I need? What kind of education do I need to properly raise this child to the best of my ability? And these are the kind of things that you want to be considering when you look at the role of motherhood in your sequencing of your life. So particularly with the 0 to 5, again, I just want to stress that this is a crucial age where children, in the first 2 years of their lives, from the time they are born to that second year of life, they, in their mind, do not see themselves as separate from the mother. They see themselves as one complete unit. So imagine if you were to take away from that and go back to work, or be away from your child for extended periods of time, what kind of disruption might occur between that, relationship between the mother and the child. And that's not to say that sometimes it doesn't have to happen, and I'm not promoting that people judge people who have to go back to work, but I'm simply requesting that as a community that we really consider this question about what we are doing to support women and mothers in those first 2 years of the child's life, so that they have appropriate support, so that they don't have to do that necessarily, so that we can raise the building bricks of our community, our children, and give them the full rights that they deserve, and so that we can create healthy communities. Beyond the role of motherhood, we want to think about the women who choose not to have children, right? And what space in our community that we are allowing for them, and what that means in terms of sequencing and their lives. We often stigmatize the sisters who are not getting married, and this has been a long problem in the community, certainly in the American Muslim community. And instead of embracing that maybe they have other things to offer or other things to work on, we make them feel badly about their position. We don't offer them solutions. We're not coming to them and saying, we have a brother for you to marry. We also have stigmatized the role of polygamy in our community, so that doesn't appear to be a real viable option, although some still practice it. So what I want us to consider as a community is how can we support these women better, and also the idea of loneliness and being alone, right? So if we think about that Allah has a plan for everyone, it is not necessary to stigmatize or demonize the idea of being alone. Perhaps the reason that a person is alone at any given time, whether it's by choice or maybe Allah takes their spouse from them or their family from them for some reason, that there might be a purpose behind that. Maybe it's a rahmah, a mercy from Allah, to allow that person to develop in such a way so that when a person comes to share the life with them, they're ready to take that opportunity, that they can step into that position with full awareness, with healthiness, as opposed to getting into a relationship and then trying to work out their issues while they're in that relationship. That's a lot harder to do. It's a lot more difficult to do. So I think we need to rephrase the paradigm and look at the idea that people can take this time when they're alone, and rather than worry about why I'm alone, think about, okay, since I am alone, what can I work on? Maybe I need to go see a therapist and work on issues that are unresolved in my childhood. We know that from research, when people have had trauma in their childhoods, it doesn't allow them to necessarily connect with others very well. Sometimes it cuts them off emotionally. These are the kind of issues that one can work on when they are alone. They can also work with them while they're in relationship, but it is a lot more difficult because you're also looking at interacting with the deficiencies of the other person as well, or the things that they need to work on. So when you're alone, you have the time to look at how healthy am I as a person, and are there any unresolved issues, and can I work on them? In addition to this, we also know that if someone has received some kind of trauma in their childhood, and this is the reason I bring up trauma often is because we know that in our community, in our Muslim community, there are many complex traumas from various reasons, right? From the ordinary human reasons to other outside societal influences such as war trauma, oppression, discrimination, racism. All of these things have caused trauma within our community. And so when we think about that, one thing that you may not be aware of is that when a woman experiences trauma, or a man for that matter, in their childhood, by the time they hit their mid-years, their 40s and beyond, they can have a sudden onset of depression that didn't exist before throughout their lifespan. And so it's very good and important to think about as we think about sequencing. Resolving any issues that we're aware of, the earlier the better, right? So the earlier we learn the tools to work with what is ailing us, then the better in the long term of that lifespan we will be in working it out. So these are some of the things I would like us to consider. Welcome back to Muslims and Mental Health. Again, today we're discussing sequencing and why this is so important. It is really, really important. I just want to emphasize one more time that as a community we value the role of women and figuring out the sequencing of their lives. I want to encourage mothers or daughters to sit down together and talk about with one another how, like, mothers can share with their daughters, how did you decide what sequence you were going to live out your life? And maybe it was haphazard, or maybe there was no real plan behind it, but that's a discussion to have in and of itself, right? So you can talk about why or why not that worked, what worked well, what didn't work so well, so that your daughter may learn from you how to maybe do better when it comes to her life. As well, daughters, when you look at your life and the sequencing that you're planning, sit down and write it out. It can, just like we often talk about in the United States, the Constitution of the United States being a living, breathing document. We talk about marital contracts being a living, breathing document, meaning that we go back to these documents and we revisit them because they need to breathe. As people, we grow and change, and so sometimes the things that we agree to may grow and change as well. So just like that, when you set out your plan with how you think you might want to live your life, that may also grow and change as well. There are many women who I know who thought they would have a child and then go back to work right away. And the reality set in after having the child that I'm not really sure I want to do that, right? And that's okay. It's okay to take a breath and have a different viewpoint. It's also okay to say, I don't want to do it that way either, and I want to go back to work. So both are okay. The important thing is to really examine what is best, for you, your family, the community, and really make priority what is a priority at the time. So if it's a children have rights over us as adults, to be cared for and in the best way that we can care for them. But it's important to not try to put everything on yourself and judge yourself if you're not able to live up to society's plans for you. And I think that if you take away anything, this is the message that I really want to get across, which is you need to step away for a minute as you are talking about these plans, either alone with yourself or with that mother-daughter dynamic, and look at what is society's expectation. And when I say society, I mean secular society. What is the expectation of me as a Muslim? And try to find a balance that you can live with that doesn't expect you to assimilate into secular society. Rather, looking at what are my duties as a Muslim? How can I sequence my life in such a way that I feel fulfilled, and at the same time meet those duties and responsibilities and find the fulfillment in them. Right now, we live in a populist culture where people are getting their validation very externally. I was even hearing in the last few weeks in pop culture, there's a song that the children are listening to which expresses that a man will choose a girl who doesn't have very many likes, meaning likes on her social media, because she would be easy prey for him. And I think that we really, I often think that cultural production really does represent the mindset of where people are at any given time in a culture. And given that this is the kind of music that is being produced, we really need to take a break and look at, how this is affecting our women and their value in our community, because they are so valuable to us. I'm going to conclude this episode at this time, but I want to point you to the website. I'm going to have a few different handouts that you can print out and use with your family, with the women in your family. The men are free to do this as well, but this is particularly focused on women. So I want to say I'm very humbled and want to support our women in any way that we can. I do appreciate the feedback that you've given me. This episode actually is a direct result of one of the questions that I received via email, but I've also received this question verbally from many people. So please continue to send your comments, your questions, your concerns. You can reach me at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. And those handouts that I was referring to will be available on www.nafshealertherapy.wordpress.com. And we look forward to any of your feedback, comments, and concerns. Please join us for another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Thank you, and assalamu alaikum.